Dragi gosti, dobro večer, dobrodošli na novo izdanje programa Fusnote Uživo. Večeras, kao i prošle godine, imamo goste iz umjetničke, likovne, ali ja više volim reći umjetničke jer je ona mnogo šira od onog najužeg pojma likovnosti, rezidencije Kamen u selu Orah, dakle u blizini Trebinja. Večeras je s nama tu i voditeljica, organizatorica kolonije rezidencije Kamen, Koštana Banović, koja će nam reći u nekoliko najosnovnijih teza predstaviti šta je ta u stvari rezidencija i šta je njen raison d'être, zbog čega ona uopšte ovdje postoji i zašto treba da postoji, a potom će nam predstaviti svoje ovogodišnje goste u rezidenciji, dakle 3 umjetnika iz Holandije i Sjedinjenih Država, a poslije toga, nakon toga ćemo Igor Dutina, dakle profesor sa Likovne akademije u Trebinju, i ja imati po neko škakljivo, zanimljivo, više ili manje pitanje za umjetnike koji su večeras s nama, pa da ne bismo dužili. Dakle, Koštana, otkud ideja o rezidenciji Kamen, kako je došlo do te ideje, kako je ostvarena, koliko si zadovoljna onim što je rezidencija Kamen uspjela do sada uradi i šta sa Kamenom sutra?
Okay. Kamen Artist Residency is founded in 2019, so this is our 4th season. We even survived last 2 years, which were COVID years, and so many people decided actually not to come in the end. The idea is, in fact, to have an interdisciplinary residency in our region and to allow international artists to come and, in fact, to get to know culture of this region. What is the most important, I thought, was in fact kind of exchange, kind of a meeting with the local artists, with the local conditions, possibilities, but firstly, in fact, a meeting with this culture, because I've been living myself in abroad for many years, so I noticed, in fact, that this region is somehow not so very interesting. It's still seen a bit like a kind of a dark Balkans. So in fact, I wanted to create something that the artists from abroad could come and we meet maybe on a kind of a most human way, to meet people from here, to meet the culture, and also make art. So this is our first group of this season. Interesting enough, in the past we had mostly artists who wanted to come to do research and in fact to be like inspired by the conditions or region, culture, language. But this group was in fact very special for me because these were all artists who in fact wanted to be in a kind of retreat, to be able to work in a studio, in fact somehow to move their practice to the studio here. Of course, to be open for any kind of inspiration or meeting with what in fact our region and surrounding can offer, but mostly they were focused on their own practice and in fact prolong their practice, but just in another surrounding. I think an artist residency is becoming and has already become one of the very important parts of the practice of a contemporary artist. Artists like to travel, like to meet other cultures, like to experiment and to see what they could make, in fact, in completely different surrounding, which they don't know. I myself was also spending lots of time in residencies. I think I was in about 11 residencies in very different conditions, very different organizations, from totally organized, perfect places to a very simple, like very basic kind of a concrete room, and that's it, but very inspiring cultures. So I wanted to found something like that, in fact, to offer artists all these positive and interesting parts which I found while I was at the residencies. So this is our first group of this season. We have 3 groups every season, like kind of a late spring, beginning of summer, May, June. Then we have the summer group, July, August, and then the fall group, September and October. So these are Mariah Dekenga from United States, Michael Perona from United States, and Marnix van Oom from the Netherlands. And you already saw their presentation, so it will be, I think, easier to have a talk about it. Thank you.
Igore, ko će prvi? Ok, ja ću. Ok, ja imam neki konceptić, Okay, I'll start with the closest person to me, Marnix. Okay. You are in a field of conceptual art.
I come from a conceptual art.
Yes. Okay. Tell me, what's a position? At this moment, I'm not really interested in conceptual art per se. I'm more interested in a position of viewer, of somebody who is a recipient of your art. So tell me, what do you consider to be a desired position of a viewer? And since in conceptual art, the role of a viewer exceeds the role of pure spectator. So that's what I'm really interested in. How do you see the role of a person who perceive, who is a recipient of your art?
Well, what is most important is first the way I would present it. And I wouldn't present it just like this. I would present it in a more physical experience kind of setting. So when they would see my video, there would be also bodily reactions to my work. So maybe the seats are a bit less comfortable than a normal seat, or they are extremely comfortable and they fall asleep. So, and then coming down, let's take just a video, for example. If I would just present the video as I would now, I hope people get the sense of humor that's underlying my video, but also share this certain universal desire of why it is what we do. And it doesn't have to be an art. You don't have to be an artist to question who you are or what you do. And is it what you do from 9 to 5 or whatever hours you work? Is that who you are? I'm not sure, but reflecting on it, that's getting closer to who you are. If you can question whatever it is what you are, so not just a person with a identity that you supposedly constructed throughout your life, but if you can actually question those things, then we are very close to what I desire from a viewer. But if I ever manage to get that from a viewer, I don't know. I've seen people laugh hysterically at my work, but I've also seen people walk away. So yeah, I'm not sure if I'm there at the universal level yet, but we'll see. But thank you for your question. Very nice.
Thank you.
Can I add to that question?
You can do whatever. You can do whatever you want.
So you mentioned humor. I almost laughed when I saw your video, and that is added quality to me as a spectator. So tell me a bit about humor in art, and does the art needs to be deadly serious to be considered serious?
Well, let's just first say humor isn't something to be laughed at. Humor is very serious. It is within humor that you can laugh. But humor as a thing, as a phenomenon, is very serious, because without laughing there's no crying and vice versa. So yeah, my life would suck if I would never have a laugh. So I think it's very important to be able to make art that can cause people to laugh, but it's equally important to make art that makes people be, I don't know, more politically critical, or I don't know, but it's all facets of life, and they should all be tackled in art, and art should never have like a one direction, right? Like, life is not one phenomenon, it's a combination of infinite phenomena that should be questioned or just presented sometimes. It's also quite nice to just present something to the public. But humor for me is very much important in the sense that it is a language that I just always want to discover. Where, I mean, you can write about humor. It's humor to me is on the same level as love, for example. You want to put it to words, but you can't. You don't know where it actually comes from, humor. Like, why is it that we can laugh about stuff? I don't know. So I like to make stuff that make me laugh or make me feel uncomfortable about myself. And thus I start laughing, just to, laugh something away, for example. Those things are all, they seem very banal and daily, but they should not be overlooked, I think. And to elaborate on that, and what I didn't actually mention in my presentation, at the core of this question of why was I so sure of being an artist, because I'm never really sure about anything in life. I'm very much always like, oh, this could be fun or that. But my decision of being an artist is very much, solid, like a rock. But then that doesn't mean I don't question what kind of artist I am. And what is very much important to ask yourself as an artist, how does my artistic practice exist on a daily level? So sleeping is important, because you sleep, you're a human. Artists are not like a written concept, they're people. So also things like, oh, I have a sore throat, how does this affect my practice? Or, oh, I had a really, really rough night, I didn't sleep, but I still have to go to my studio to work because it's my profession. So how does it affect my, for example, editing of my videos? Well, sometimes I just go through it really rapidly because I'm cranky and I just want to get it over with. And then I leave it in my video because, it's like a sketchbook of daily feelings. I don't know. Anyway, I'm ranting. But thank you so much for your question. Humor, very important. Laugh, people, laugh.
Thank you. Okay, we go with the next person. Okay. Okay, Michael, question for you. Conceptual art may grow to the point at which that kind of art becomes not only difficult to be understood, but also it becomes difficult to be recognized as the art. We may discuss that issue as long as we want, whether in what extent conceptual art is art or not, etc., etc. But that's not important issue. What is really important for me at this moment is that conceptual art that steps over the boundaries of the conventional art always brings us to the very basic, to the most basic and probably the most important question about the art. What is the art and what it makes the art? I'm really interested to hear the answer prepared for someone who is, just imagine, I'm a simple peasant from newly discovered country, somewhere in the world, in unknown world. So I know nothing about art. Please tell me what the art is.
Thank you for the question, Elias. It's a timeless question. It's impossible to answer. But I guess for me, art is anything that instigates a curiosity or an interest to investigate further. So that could be an idea, it could be not visual, it could be a provocation, a statement you make. Your question could be art. It could also be this glass of water versus this glass of water. It's making me think about, oh, this has a fog on it. It changes the way the visual is. Or the image behind the water is blurred or different than the image behind this water. So it's just getting me to think in a different way. And I think maybe on a very simple level, that's what art is and what it can be. It could be a color. You stop and see a color that you haven't seen before, or you see a color and it reminds you of some memory you had 10 years ago. That could be art. It's in the eyes of the viewer, I guess, to decide what art is. And as Marnix mentioned also, this idea of merging life and art. It's something that I've really come to embrace in the last few years, as far as it could be something like what I mentioned with my Polaroid project. It's a daily act that I do. It could be as mundane as eating breakfast every morning, but it's recognizing this thing, this daily act. It could be a chore that you do, stacking wood. But if you think about it in a certain way, it can transcend the act of stacking wood, which then to me would make it a work of art. So it's really it can be as simple as in the mind of the person deciding how they're doing something.
Okay, thank you for your answer. In my understanding, as a simple person without previous knowledge from... No, I am in this situation, I am simple person from newly discovered country. I know nothing, as Manuel from Faulty Towers would say, I know nothing. So what I can conclude from what you told me about the art, if anything or everything can be art, there is actually, is there need for an artist? Do we need an artist if anything is prone to be an art?
Yes, we need an artist, but everyone is an artist. What we really need is the sensibility of an artist. So we need everyone here to, even for 5 seconds a day, be an artist. And that could be tying their shoes and noticing the touch of the shoelace on their fingers and just noticing that. That's art to me. That is being an artist. Being aware, being sensitive to the things that most people are not sensitive to. But anyone has the ability to do that. It's just acknowledging it. It's not a skill. It's not something you need to go to school for, but it is a mindset. And I think this is a new idea. Like in the past, being an artist meant going to a school, being trained how to do a specific skill so that then you can make a specific thing. That is not how we think anymore. And we could talk for hours about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But as a professor, I don't actually teach technique to my students. I don't show them. Occasionally, I might say, oh, if you held the brush this way, it'd be a little easier. Put your palette here, then you don't have to reach across it. You can, you know, simple things I show them. But I don't show them how to draw because I want them to draw the way they need to draw, not the way I think drawing should be. So really, I'm trying to just teach them how to be an artist, how to open their mind to the possibilities. And I think maybe that's, I'll stop there.
I will, of course, add to this conversation with a question that you show us your personal progress, your development of your perceptions, your poetics, you are staying the same, basically. You are still a artist who is driven by landscapes and architecture primarily, as I see. So you are changing in a pretty fast pace. The world is changing in even more faster manner, and you teach students art. How that two facts, so your progress and progress of the world, relate to your teaching practice.
And I think it goes back to what I just said. I don't really teach specific things because I almost, in a way, am obsolete to what my students need. Marnix is 25 years younger than me. I'm learning from him. I'm expanding my ideas about art from him because he is the current, he's beyond the current developing artist, but I'm already baked to a certain extent. I can change, I could try to change, but I can't radically change. But I can learn small things from the younger artists. I kind of, this is probably a faulty logic somewhere, but you know, when I get in an argument with my dad about politics or something, it's like, he's wrong. He's going to be wrong because there's no way his old idea can continue to exist. In the same way that I am wrong if I try to argue with Marnix. His ideas are going to be the new ideas when I'm an older man. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like a paradox. So that's where I can't teach a student a specific philosophy or orthodoxy or a specific skill. It has to be a more general skill that then they can adapt their specific needs into my pattern. You know, it's like, and is that answering your question in a way?
Are you sure that today, art today is the same as the art of the future? Are you certainly sure?
Is art today the same as the art in the future? There will be the essence. I think the essence, yes. Exactly, like, you know, it's different, but it's the same. So like Mariah talked about it with her work, this idea of time that comes into the work. It's like a painting by an artist from 100 years ago is changing physically a little bit. It might be collecting dirt, it might be fading, it might be getting darker, but it's not really changing. But yet it's able to speak to us, to some people, today, 100 years later. Mona Lisa, 500 years later. Stolach, tombstones, 1,500 years, you know, whatever the cave paintings, 30,000 years ago, they still speak to us. So there has to be some universal essence that transcends time.
Okay. I kept the most provocative question for you, Mara. So it appears that conceptual art jumped into the world as a kind of rebellion, led by those who don't want to be entrapped and limited by the boundaries of conventional art. And yes, it is kind of a rebellion, but you don't always need rebels to have rebellion. So that's the reason I ask you, because it's not really necessary to have a rebel in rebellion. Do you consider yourself to be a rebel? If yes, against what or who are you leading your rebellion? And why do you rebel? I mean, what's purpose, what's intent, what's desired end state of your rebellion? I'm not really interested in having answer in general terms about conceptual art as a space of rebellion and bunch of rebels inside. I'm interested in opinion of a single artist in that world.
Thank you. Am I a rebel? This is a good question. Well, this whole conversation is kind of interesting to me because this is the kind of an ongoing argument that I have with Michael all the time, and that I'm not so sure there's a clear dichotomy between what is conceptual art and what is, I guess, what we would call formal art. You know what I'm saying? I don't know that that's really a thing, because ultimately everything has a form. Every idea has a form that exists in the world. Maybe it's language, maybe it's an object. You know, and every object in the world, even this glass, you know, every object that humans make is the result of thinking. You know, so I guess you could kind of look at anything as a conceptual object or a formal object. It's kind of just like it's like a game we play with ourselves when we're looking at something. Do I think of myself as a rebel? I don't really, I think it depends on how I'm thinking about myself. Like when I'm in the studio, I'm really just doing what makes sense to me to do. So I'm not really thinking about it like, am I rebelling against something? Am I thinking of myself in the context of something? It's really just like all I can do in the moment to move forward. But at the same time, when I step out of it and I start thinking about the values that generate the work, I'm like, yeah, in some ways it's kind of rebellious. It's like I'm really into craft. Craft is not cool right now. You know, craft is kind of a dirty word. Like you're not supposed to be, you know, and I'm like, I come from a long line of like master craftspeople. Like my mom and my dad made the house I grew up in. They made almost every object in the house. Like I'm very attached to labor in objects, and I think that's really important. So in that sense, yeah, I'm probably a rebel, but I'm not doing it to be rebellious. It's just the things that I find important in a lot of ways, not all of the things, a lot of the things that I find important are very part of the mainstream, but there are definitely things that I do find important that are not congruent with popular opinion. Does that answer your question? Yeah, okay.
Okay, the last question for this evening would be, you mentioned several times when in your presentation that, how should I say, experiencing is very important in perceiving art. Tell me your personal difference when you're the watcher of the art. Tell me your personal difference between experiencing and understanding.
That's a great question. That's one of my favorite questions because I think about this all the time, especially because I think that is one of the things that sort of led me to making abstract painting, was because it's sort of abstract painting because there's nothing depicted. It kind of forces you into this experiential space quickly because there's not something you can easily name. And you can't go, this is that. So you don't go to that sort of discursive place in your brain as quickly as you do when you're like, okay, this is a painting of a frog. You know what I mean? You go to this kind of language place in your brain. And I guess the work that I've seen like in my life that had the most profound effect on me was the work that spoke to me in this other way, sort of the way that like music we all love speaks to us. It's like nobody asks what the meaning of a symphony is. It speaks to us and this like, is it emotional? I don't even know what you call it. So like that to me is what I'm talking about when I talk about experiential. It's like something you feel. It's not something you sit down and write an essay about it, or you read the label, or you have to read like 4 books to understand like what this thing is. Like I want it to be something that like you relate to, I guess, in a more immediate way. Does that make sense?
Nice.
It makes for you.
Yeah, I just, yeah, okay. Thank you.
We had an agreement that we ask just 2 questions per person, and that will be, I think, enough. If someone have something to say after, be my guest. Otherwise, I will ask the audience if someone have anything to ask. Koštanu možete pitati umjetnike, gospodina Elsa, mene nemojte pitati ništa. Evo ni Elsa, ne pitajte ništa. Ako nema pitanja, ja bih vam se svima zahvalio na prisustvu. Thank you for being here with us.
People don't have any questions. Happens often, all this new information you have to.
Also, we talked a long time, so I understand if you're tired and you don't want to hear anymore.
We have to have a drink. So it's not because the people are not interested, but it's just, I hope you enjoyed. I hope it was interesting meeting with the 3 new artists. And I hope to see you again for at our second presentation somewhere in August. Thank you very much, Mariah. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Marnix. And Elias and Igor, thank you very much.
Priveli smo kraju večerašnje izdanje Fusnota uživo. S obzirom da je ovo malo specifična situacija i oni koji budu gledali na YouTube-u ovaj snimak, predlažem da pogledaju i snimke na sajtu Kulturnog centra Trebinje sa prezentacije naše večerašnje gošće i 2 gosta iz Sjedinjenih Država i Holandije, da bi dobili malo precizniju sliku o tome i uvid u to o čemu smo pričali. Inače, tokom ovog ljeta Kulturni centar Trebinje i program Fusnote uživo susretat će se još nekoliko puta sa rezidencijom Kamen. Za one koji prate Fusnote na YouTube-u, na našem kanalu, dužan sam samo jedno objašnjenje. Dakle, čitav program Fusnota je zamišljen, prevashodno je usmjeren na publiku sa ovog prostora obuhvaćenog jezikom koji je razumljiv nama ovdje. Ja taj jezik lično zovem humskim, jugoslavenskim, oni koji hoće neka zovu kako god žele, dakle srpskim, hrvatskim, bosanskim, bošnjačkim, crnogorskim, potpuno svejedno, jer ime jezika apsolutno nikakve veze sa jezikom kao bićem, jezikom kao prostorom bitka, jezikom kao tvorcem i prenositeljem smisla nema. Međutim, večerašnje Fusnote su bile onako malo kuriozitetno, bile su kao i prošlogodišnje Fusnote dvojezične, bilingvalne. Ja sam razmišljao da li je to u redu, da li treba na taj način izlaziti iz nekih postavljenih okvira, onda rekao pa zašto ne? Jer Rezidencija Kamen uglavnom ugošćava umjetnike koji se bave konceptualnom umjetnošću, a ako išta voli da preskače barijere, da se s prezirom odnosi prema barijerama, to je konceptualna umjetnost, pa tako, dakle, još jednom, vi koji gledate ovo na YouTube-u, nemojte se zbuniti, već naredne fusnote koje ćemo snimati za nekoliko dana, vratit će se u prostor jednog jezika i nećete imati potrebu da podešavate svoje slušne aparate čas na jedan, čas na drugi jezik. Hvala vam lijepo, vidimo se uskoro opet.